Hi everyone, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Exade Replay, coming to you with episode 32 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week in Exade, we've got a lot to cover. This was a very plot-driven episode. Really, there's a first half and a second half. There's only one fight in either side, but both are very significant. So let's go ahead and talk about what happened again with the opening of the series. So it seems like every week they're making some sort of addendum to the opening there of Kamen Rider Exade. So last week we saw that they were adding different people in, switching people out. This week we see that Paradox level 99 has been removed from the opening and now been replaced with Kamen Rider Chronus, who will be playing a big part in this week's episode. Now, as we start off this week's episode, both sides, the Bugsters and the members of the CR, are ready for battle. Both sides think, no, this is time to end everything, no more fighting, let's get this done. So the Bugsters are preparing to launch their attack, the CR is getting ready to launch their attack since they've beaten all the lower level Bugsters, which only leaves Palad, Graphite, and Lovelyka. Now this would be all well and good considering we've been waiting this whole series to see these two forces combat each other head on, but there's a third variable entered into the mix in the form of Masamune-dan. Now, as you'll recall, Masamune-dan was imprisoned there because of Kuroto-dan having framed him for the Bugster virus outbreak several years ago. But since Kuroto has been put in as the person responsible for the Bugster virus, all charges have been dropped against Masamune, so he is now out and a free man. Now, admittedly, we don't know a lot about him other than what we've been told thus far. He will give some more exposition later on as the episode progresses, but I don't want to get into it too early for those of you who are still kind of trying to stay away from spoilers, but then again, if you're watching this, you kind of already know. Now, for this beginning portion, there's three things I want to cover. First, there's the idea of this final boss that they have to beat. So the CR has been told by Shin Kuroto-dan, that there is a final boss to Kamen Rider Chronicle who has the name of Game Deus. Now, we're told that Game Deus has the power to beat any and all combatants there in Kamen Rider Chronicle. The only thing that can beat it is the power of Kamen Rider Chronus, who they mention, but nobody has that actual power yet. Much the same, the Bugsters are still in the dark about this Game Deus Bugster. Nobody knows who that is, where they've come from, only Kuroto-dan had this information. So at this point they figure, well, we shouldn't wait for that, let's go ahead and launch our attack now. The other interesting part is the first part of the episode where we do have one fight between the Bugsters there on the field and the Kamen Riders. They seem to be coming to the aid of a ride player who has some back problems, but doesn't seem to be really combating the Bugsters all too well. The interesting part is the identity of this ride player, which happens to be Hiro's dad. Now, the reasoning behind this makes sense for a parent. I guess if last week was the Mother's Day episode, this week is the Father's Day episode for more than one reason. So here we see that Hiro's dad has been fighting here. We don't know for how long, we just know that he has been playing Kamen Rider Chronicle, and he's aware that if the CR found out that he was actually taking part in this, the Ministry of Health would probably revoke his license. But he has a good reason. He says to Hiro, oddly enough, or not even so odd, that he's not the only one who's suffering from Saki's death, Saki of course being his girlfriend that Taiga wasn't able to save. It's nice to see that he still cares very much for his son and was willing to go to these lengths to try and help him out. But now the question is, like I've been asking through some of these videos, how long has he been playing Kamen Rider Chronicle? Because yes, admittedly, he's been gone for several episodes, so one could argue that maybe that's exactly what he was doing. He was out in the field playing Kamen Rider Chronicle, albeit very badly, and trying to help out, trying to make some sort of contribution. That's one way of taking it. Now, when faced with this fact, everybody understands where he's coming from as a father, that parental nature does make sense. But Hiro tells him there's something more that you can help us out with. As Kuroto-dan told us earlier on in the episode, all of the data for the lost people who have gotten game over, or who have been taken over by Bugsters, would have been stored in the proto-gashot of the Bugster that took over them. So in Saki's case, Hiro's girlfriend, her data would be stored in the proto-Dragonite Hunter Z gashot that of course would belong to Graphite. So the easiest thing to do would be do this the bureaucratic way. Call up the Ministry of Health and tell them to give us the proto-gashats. This is what Hiro tells him to do. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to work though, since the Ministry of Health has, wouldn't you know it, misplaced all of those gashats. Now back on the other side of town, again going back to Masamune-dan, he has been reinstated as the president of the Ginmen Corporation, having no problem fitting back in, except for the small problem of Amagasaki-den. Now right away we see that these two characters don't get along at all. Amagasaki likes being the president, but of course Masamune Masamune is the president. Beyond that, the two personalities clash very distinctly here, and Masamune tells him that he's very much aware that he's a Bugster, so there's no point in hiding that. Now apparently somebody seems to have left a Bugvisor's Zwei in the drawer right there in the desk for Masamune, along with a copy of Kamen Rider Chronicle. Now at this point, Amagasaki decides to tell him there's no point in you using that, you've never been inoculated, this, that, and the other stuff we already know as the audience. But for anybody else who's been watching, i.e. the audience, we kinda know where this is going. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's go ahead and get into the second portion of this episode, which is the big fight, which is what I was really looking forward to since last week. So we have combatants on both sides. We have basically what amounts to a 3-on-4 match, which actually isn't too accurate because it's really like 3-on-4 with 2 on the side. So we have Palad, Graphite, and Lovelika, all who are level 99, versus the other riders who are level 99, 50, 50, and X0, however you want to phrase that. So they seem to be fairly matched up in terms of numbers. The other thing to factor in, of course, would be the two other riders there, of course, Saiba Nico and Popipipo Papo. They have been given explicit orders to not engage until it seems that they're going to get the final blow. This, of course, makes sense in the context that Kamen Rider Chronicle needs to be beaten by the same person. So this is why it's been set up for Saiba Nico to be taking the final hit and actually getting credit for the kill. Now, the idea of that being the plan makes sense, but at the same time, it kind of makes Saiba Nico look even more weak, which is a complaint that I've been having with the show for the last couple of episodes. Now, the plan that the writers have put in place makes sense on paper. Take Lovelika out first, since that seems to be the one person that nobody can hit, and it makes sense how they do it. They use the power of Maximum Mighty Action X to reprogram Lovelika to be able to take physical hits. And just when you think everything's gonna be hunky-dory, everything's gonna be solved in this episode, this could be the finale of the series, somebody shows up. Who? Masamune-dan. And yes, Masamune shows up looking like a boss, sounding like a boss. He's had this whole thing wrapped up from the beginning. Kuroto-dan thought he was the one in charge, and then Pala thought he was in charge after getting rid of Kuroto-dan, but it turns out they've both been played by Masamune the whole time. He tells everybody that he infected himself with the Bugster virus 16 years ago, so Emu wasn't the only person who had been infected at that point, and that has given him what they call a perfect antibody, which, as Shin Kuroto-dan mentioned at the beginning of the episode, is exactly what's needed to wield the power of Kamen Rider Chronos, basically spelling out that he's about to become Kamen Rider Chronos. And admittedly, for my money, his debut here in the show is comparable to some of the other great villain writers that we've ever had, but he does also continue the trend of being another jerk dad for the last 3 years through Drive, Ghost, and now Exe. Now, as we've been told since last week, Chronos' big power is to be able to control time. Now, I want to go ahead and bring this up because it's important to make the distinction between his control over time versus other time manipulation that we've seen in other Kamen Rider series. So what we're shown here is that Chronos has the ability to pause, which is basically to stop all action on the field except for himself, and then he can restart the action, and then everything else takes place as it was supposed to. Now, it's important to make the distinction between things we've seen previously, like Clock Up in Kamen Rider Den-O, Density Shift in Drive, and the Time Vent from Kamen Rider Ryuki. Now on screen these effects might all look the same, but they're all done in different ways. With Clock Up, the rider or the worm in that case move faster than everything around them, so everything else looks still. With Density Shift, everything else is slowed down and the Roy Mudes move faster. Now I do think that the way that they've decided to show how pause works is actually more akin to the Time Vent that Kamen Rider Odin used, and that would also tie back to all the other Ryuki ties that Exe seems to have. And as a result of his clearly overwhelming power, Chronos is able to make very quick work of everyone on the field, and actually making sure that Lovelika is dead. Lovelika is not coming back. The reason for this being is that apparently if you're killed while time is paused, that eliminates any other continues that you might have had. Which sounds kind of cheap, but at the same time, Kuroto-dan had a hand in designing this, so I guess that makes sense, but at the same time, that does make me worry about how they're going to handle this, especially going into the latter part of the series, which we're starting right now, and how that's going to play out versus Exe when he gets his final form, and then this actual game Deus person-creature thing, how exactly they're going to match up with that. And we're going to see more of this struggle in next week's episode when we see that Hiro is very tempted to do whatever it takes to get Saki back now that he's been given this information and let known that yes, there is a possibility of getting her back, but what's it going to cost everybody else? So that's what we've got this episode. Admittedly, I kind of had the feeling that Masamune was going to be Chronos from when he was first introduced, because he looked a little too cool sitting there in jail, and once we started going through the list of possible candidates, he was really the only one left. But I do like how his debut makes sense, and he necessitates the need for Ex-Aid to have more power than Maximum Mighty Action X allows him. But those have been my thoughts so far. I want to hear what you guys thought in the comments below, so let's go ahead and talk about what we saw this week. First off, Hiro's dad. Do you guys think he's been playing Kamen Rider Chronicle on the slide, or has he just not been there because of bad writing? Also, there's Lovelika's death. Do you think that it's worth it that Lovelika died here, or they should have kept him around a few more episodes? And then lastly, of course, Kamen Rider Chronus. Did you guys correctly guess who he was going to be? And also, how do you like his power compared to Clock Up, Density Shift, or Time Vent? You guys tell me. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 32 of Ex-Aid Replay for episode 32 of the series, Judgment Passed. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.